This is Sophie Heller, and this is an ACT reading question. This question is a hide and seek question because it's asking you to find out what this primary distinction is. So let's look at our passage and just get an idea of what two things are being compared. So it starts off by telling us that the great fault of this modern school of poetry is it's manyfold. This is what modern poetry does. So it'll continue from lines 1 to 6 to talk just about modern poetry. So we know that one of the things that we're going to be distinguishing is this modern poetry. So let's find out what our second thing that we're distinguishing from. Okay, so the passage goes on to mention Shakespeare. So we know that Shakespeare is not modern because he's a few hundred years ago. So Shakespeare, by contrast, did not so understand poetry. So we know that this is a contrast because it's saying that Shakespeare did not agree with the characterization of poetry given in lines 1 to 6. So Shakespeare, he did not give this interpretation, both nature and art. He had his own ideas, and the paragraph just goes on, but these first few lines should give us the idea of what distinctions being made. So let's look at our choices. Our choices tell us that we have choice 1, the poetry of the senses and the poetry of imagination. So we're not really talking about the poetry of either of these things. We're talking about modern poetry versus Shakespearean poetry. So that's not going to be as accurate. Choice number 2 is exactly what we talked about. So the modern school of poetry and that of Shakespeare. So easy, introduced immediately within the first 6 lines of the passage. This is going to be right. And our next two choices aren't supported in the passage. So we have the poetry of egotism and sensibility, not talked about, and the modern school of poetry, so that is talked about, and the poetry of human mood. So since we're trying to compare modern poetry to Shakespeare, choice 2 is our most accurate answer.